custodians of the land on which we meet, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present.
We thank you, Lord, for the honour of being called by our fellow citizens to this office of honour and trust. Give us grace, diligently and honourably, free from private interest or prejudice, to discharge the duties entrusted to us to the common good and in your sight, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Please have a seat. Welcome, everybody. We have no apologies tonight that I'm aware of. Are there any declarations of interest? I'll move to the confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Miles. Yeah. Thank you.
One item I'd like to before we pass them.
Question? Yes, thank you.
It relates to resolution 006/19.3. That was the issue of the safety at the corner of Alexandra and Ferry Streets. I note the minutes have said that the report be brought back to the local area traffic committee. Now, I believe Councillor Miles moved that motion. I think his intention was for that to be the Public Transport and Traffic Advisory Committee, because I remember him looking to me and acknowledging or asking whether that was appropriate. As the chair of that committee, I presume that was the committee that was intended. Can that be corrected?
Yes, we'll do that. Thank you, Councillor.
I also just have one
Yes.
comment as well. Just on the question without notice about Pittwater Road, it tells me where it's at and our opinion. Is that, I'm just curious, or whether it can be taken on notice, is that it then, or is there more that we can do to lobby to the RMS through you, Mr Mayor, to the General Manager, to lobby to the RMS about that very dangerous stretch of road?
Can you point us back to the item? I'm sorry.
So it's item 13.4, page 14.
Page 14, thank you.
And it's referring to the where Pittwater Road, where people run dash between the bakery and Harris Farm now.
Yes.
And the answer tells me, you know, why and what the logic is perhaps behind whose responsibility it is, but it doesn't give me an answer to go back to the residents with. This comes up periodically, and I just do feel like it's something that we need to advocate for with RIDE or with the RMS at a traffic meeting, or is there more being done than just...
Through you, Mr Mayor, I might take that on notice and we'll come back with what else can be done, Councillor. Yeah.
We'll circulate that as an email to everybody. Yep. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Refer to 3.6 on page 7. It's a question, I guess, through you to the Mayor, to the General Manager. The substantive motion was dealt with, but the resident who spoke raised issues of code of conduct. I was just wondering, is there a process, or what happens with those concerns from here on in? Or are they just... Is there something that we as a council, because it's a code issue, that we need to do, or is there a process that will give some clarity and finalisation to that?
I'll pass it back to you, if I could.
Yep. Through you, Mr Mayor, on the night the Speaker did raise that as an issue. I have not received any formal complaint in that regard from the Speaker.
So it has to be a formal complaint?
There hasn't been.
So it just hangs?
Councillor Sanderson.
I don't know whether you wish to handle this as discussion about the minutes or whether you want to put the motion first. I just wanted to comment on item 3.4, if I could.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, that related to the motion to install CCTV down at Orchard Bars. I note there's been a bit of discussion about that in the time since, and I'm very pleased that Council took the advice of the General Manager in terms of waiting for our safety audit. In the process, I came across this document, which I'm sure the General Manager is very aware about the processes that's required to go through to have CCTVs installed. and there is quite a lot to it.
Yeah.
And I think this was pointed out over the weekend at our workshops that the safety audit is a requirement before we get any funding. So I'm glad that we're advised well by the General Manager and we're taking the right decision on that one.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further comments? I think I'll put the motion for the minutes. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. So move on to the next item, which I think is 3.1, the footpath in Reeby Road. And we have some speakers for this. We have Miss Emma Paxton. Would you like to speak first, please? Welcome, Emma.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to hand out a map and letter of support, please, from the principal of Hunters Hill High. Can I? Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got the letter, but we don't have the map. Do you have a spare map that you'd like to share with us?
I'll get the bill.
Councillor Sanderson.
Oh,
He won't need it. But we're down there today,
So I'm here this evening speaking on behalf of Hunters Hill High School Parents and Citizens Association. As you know, we've been really concerned about the safety of our 700 enrolled students while using Reeby Road. At the council meeting on the 29th of October last year, it was recommended that the committee agreed in principle to installing a pedestrian crossing but further down the road and to allow the construction of a footpath on the western side of Reeby Road. Council will investigate if it meets warrants and will approach RMS for funding under the Safety Around Schools program. Whilst this was fantastic news, we're concerned about the time frame of this happening. This was first highlighted to Council some years ago, but more recently last June with Steve Carapis, the principal of Hunters Hill High, Greg Lill and several others. The school is growing each year. Council has a strategic outcome of footpaths being accessible, safe and connected. Reeby Road does not meet that criteria and we feel as though the students' lives are at risk. 1/4 of our school population, 187 students approximately, who live in Main Cove and its surrounds, walk each morning from bus 693W on the off-ramp of Burns Bay Road onto Church Street, then down Reeby Road. Another 1/4 come from the other side of the overpass near Gladesville Road, meaning up to half the school population are forced to cross the road at the top of Reeby Road, near Church Street, because the pavement drops off onto dirt and rocks within several metres on the west side. That is 350 kids on average every morning up against dangerous traffic, turning quickly left down the hill, only because they cannot stay on the west side of Reeby Road as there's no pavement. We believe that if there was a slight widening of the footpath on the west side of Reeby Road and it was sealed all the way down to below the avenue, kids would not be forced to cross at the top, putting their lives and drivers' lives at risk. The traffic is a lot calmer beyond the avenue and a crossing could be built there between the grassy land and the school, with minimal interference for buses, cars and residents. A pavement is essential on this side for safe passage to the school. We understand that Council are looking into it and we're happy to assist any way we can to speed this process up. The more time that passes, the more chance there is that something will happen to another child, such as Tracy's daughter, who had just started at the school last year in Year 7 when she fell off the pavement onto Reeby Road. On behalf of the PNC and the school, we urge you to move on this quickly for the safety of the kids and to please keep us informed as things progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just stay with us a moment. Councillors, are there any questions of Ms Paxton? Councillor Sanderson.
With respect to the accident that occurred, that was just a matter of someone tripping off the gutter. There were no vehicles involved, from what I understand.
I'm sorry, can you speak up, Mr Sanderson?
I said I believe the accident involved someone tripping off the curb, that there were no vehicles involved in that incident.
There wasn't any vehicles involved in that incident, but it was stepping off the curb onto the road where there was no pram access so that she could step off the curb properly and cross the road safely. And so while she wasn't run over, thank God, it was dangerous, just to clarify.
Thank you.
Councillors, any further questions? Thank Councillor Miles.
I would have thought that children crossing Burns Bay Road and those getting off the bus here, as you've demonstrated in the map, that there'd be, or that the preference would be for there to be some, I know that when we had our on-site meeting today, there was a concern that kids would ignore the path being built and they'd cross halfway down. Would you agree with that sentiment, or do you think it's just a matter of build it and they will come?
I think it's building it and they will come. We're committed to educating the kids and reforming habits and being there.
And why
Yes,
wouldn't you
it'll
put
be
a
there.
fence on the western side like you have on the eastern side?
Excuse me just a moment. I'll give you an opportunity in a moment, please. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any further comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Ms Phillips, please join us.
Thank you, Mayor. So I am a bit passionate about this. As I put in my request to address the council meeting, my child fell stepping off the uneven pavement on the western side of Reeby Road walking to school. So just for a moment, I want you to all close your eyes. Imagine your child. Please close your eyes. Imagine your child that you've taken to primary school, you've just sent them to high school, they've just learnt how to catch a bus, they've just learnt how to use a phone, and then you get a phone call in the morning, "Mum, I'm on the side of the road, my leg's bleeding and I can see my bone." What would you do? How would you feel? And what action would you take? I'd like you to ask yourself that. And I'd like you to think that while we're talking about what we're going to do about how to fix this. And I made the application to school to have this changed, to have this fixed over nearly 12 months ago. And nothing has been done except some bodgy corrections to the bottom half of Reeby Road on the right-hand side of the pavement. Every single day, hundreds of kids cross that road and walk down to their school and are not safe. We have finally come up with a proposal that says widen the road on the western side, change the pathway so that they don't have to walk over the rocks and all of the uneven pavement on the western side, make it a safe pathway, put the crossing down past the avenue so that it doesn't interfere with the buses, it won't interfere with the traffic. If you put a fence there like you have on the eastern side, then it'll keep the kids on that pathway. The school is committed to making that change as well. I do not understand why this is not possible and why the council has not done something earlier. And I know I've met with yourself, Mayor, and I've had several meetings on this, and for me, this is a no-brainer. And the longer that you wait, the longer that it is possible that some child is going to get run over. And I feel that you're all accountable. You are all accountable for that. Because the school is there, you've approved that the school is there, but the school is not safe to get to. As a parent, you expect that your child is going to get to school safely and come home safely every afternoon. No exception. There should be no exception. And in primary school, they have lollipop people and pedestrian crossings and everything is so safe. Then we transfer them from primary school into high school and all of a sudden we think they're far too grown up to need any of that. Well, that just doesn't happen, and I'm sorry, that's just not acceptable. And I feel so passionate about this that I'm not going to let it go. And I feel if my child had have been run over, it would have been a very different situation. And obviously parents stopped to help, and thank God she wasn't run over. But what does it take to get you guys to actually put the money towards this and make a change? I don't understand why you haven't done something so far. I've made several suggestions about getting RMS and police and buses involved, and you still haven't, and you still won't. And I don't get it. Please explain.
Okay, we have an opportunity for councillors to ask you some questions at this point. So, councillors, are there any questions?
No, I would like to comment.
Councillor Miles has a question. Councillor Miles.
I can understand your passion, obviously. Having children in danger is not an ideal situation, and I get there's a bit of frustration with council moving slowly, hence why this motion came up. I take it that this proposal that has been handed out to us, which I'll table in a moment, is the preferred option of the PNC and yourself.
So basically what's happened is I've met 4 times now, and this is the final option that we've come up with. That
With council or with PNC?
Not with council, with PNC. And that this doesn't entail any interruption to buses, doesn't entail any interruption to traffic, and if we lead the children down the western side of the road, then they do not have to cross the road until they get past the avenue, and then eventually, hopefully, you'll all see that it's necessary to put a pedestrian crossing in there and move them across that way, and hopefully you'll all understand the necessary aspect of having pram access. I don't know what you formally call it, but the pram access, so that that leads the children across there rather than what it is at the moment with what is quite frankly very high pavements on the edge of the road, which is quite dangerous.
Thank you. Councillors, any further? Councillor Crussell.
Am I allowed to comment?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for your perseverance, and I do understand and empathise with receiving that call, though mine was a car hitting a tree at 110 kilometres an hour, so I do understand that feeling. And our children mean everything to us, and I know you'll do anything. I appreciate you sticking with it and have faith in the process.
Well, I don't have any faith in the process. I'm sorry, because it has taken so long for anything to happen, and I just keep getting told that council have done everything that they can, and I'm sorry, but I just don't believe that. Having spoken to RMS and having spoken to the police and having spoken to the buses, I don't think that that has happened. And it took us getting in contact with Ben to actually come up with this solution. And thank you, Ben.
Councillor Crussell.
Actually, a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to
Yes.
Mr. Krupis.
Through the General Manager.
Through the General Manager. Thank you. Is that the case, that the parents of Hunters Hill High have been told there's nothing council can do?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I might ask Mr. Krupis to explain the processes we've been through today.
Thank you.
And I think I'll ask him to do that the moment we've finished here.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So are there any further questions? Councillor Sanderson.
There's one question. On the map we've just been given, there's a red line which obviously represents the location of the pedestrian crossing that you propose. There's a exclamation mark sort of symbol down near the high school main gates. What does that represent?
Isn't that your house?
It's a Google map. That's a Google map.
Just
Right. Okay.
Google.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
In your address, or somebody's address, there was mention that there's funding sources available. Is that something you're going to talk about? Or I'd just be interested to know whether you've got some funding sources in mind, or whether or not you expect.
I would imagine that council needs to prioritise children's safety above anything else. And I know council has funds that they've allocated to other things that potentially council can reallocate to make this happen quickly.
So you're not aware of any funding sources?
I'm not a member of council and I don't work for council, but I have contacts and I know that you could reallocate funds if you wanted this to happen quickly.
Okay, no, it was just a query because we'd heard that there were funds available. We were wondering if there's something that you knew about.
We didn't.
No. So that's okay, that answers the question, thank you. Are there any further questions? All right, thank you very much. We do understand this must be a very frightening thing when children get injured, and you have my support to try and find a solution, and you had when I met you on site, and we'll keep working until we
But
find a solution.
I note that after I had your support on site, nothing has happened.
Thank you, we'll talk about that in a moment.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. So before we end the debate on this, I'd like Mr. Karipas to just give us a rundown on what has been done to date, and that might help clarify any misconceptions that we perhaps haven't acted at all in the last few months. So, Mr. Karipas, what have we done?
Thank you, Mayor. Council first was invited by the school for a site inspection mid-June 2018 with the RMS representatives on that corner site that we were at there today. Then Council began investigating into the proposal for pedestrian crossing for the school, and also results from the proposal for the crossing at Reby Road was put forward. A sketch was prepared by Council which went to the Traffic Committee on the 24th of September. The committee, which consists of the RMS, STA and police, raised concerns with regard to the pedestrian crossing. It was basically in relation to the locality and siting of it. It had an issue with the conflict of buses on Church Street. The minutes of those advisory committee were then put to the ordinary meeting of Council on the 29th of October, where the councillors resolved that they conduct a site meeting to identify alternate opportunities. As a consequence, we all went out there today and visited the site, walked up and down the site. Further to that, and as elaborated by Mrs. Phillips, in mid-January, Council's works engineer met Ms. Phillips on site and went through the proposal of the crossing, and what was established was that part of the footpath near the school needed repairs, and there was that was being done at the moment. As a consequence, a further request by Mrs. Phillips was held for the Mayor, myself and the works engineer to meet out on site, and that was held on the 31st of January. And at that meeting, we explained the history and where we are today and what Council was up to, and that we had to conduct a site meeting with the Council to look at alternate solutions for a pedestrian crossing. Following that meeting, it was agreed upon that a pram ramp crossing would be proposed or constructed at the avenue, northern side of the intersection of Reby Road at the avenue. That was agreed upon. And also that the footpath along Reby Road, and we walked it up and down, on the eastern end would be looked at in detail for repairs accordingly. Now those are, as agreed, that we are endeavouring to do those works as soon as practicable with our work schedule. So that's a side issue with regard to the pedestrian crossing as well. So that's where we're at the moment.
And where was the pedestrian crossing originally located?
Originally located on the high side near Church Street. Right.
And this matter also went to our internal committee, didn't it, roads and traffic?
That's correct, yeah.
All right. I'm sorry, you need to hold on for a moment.
Can I just add, through you, Mayor, just add the funding issue? I think what was from the minutes of the Traffic Advisory Committee, that if there was a proposal, a suggestion is that the proposal for pedestrian crossing, there's possibly funding through the RMS if that's the case. Not full funding, but part funding. So I think that's where the funding part of it came from.
Oh, excuse me, sorry. You'll just have to hold for a moment.
Just to assist.
So, councillors, are there any questions of Mr. Karipas? Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you. Did you, when you looked at all these options, did you look at the western side of Reby Road?
We looked at a pedestrian crossing. And
so you only looked at a pedestrian, you didn't look at improving the western side of Ruby
No,
Road?
the only thing about the western side, if assuming the pedestrian crossing was allocated or further sited further down the street, the issue of that retaining wall and that non-landscape footpath or width of that footpath would need to be reviewed and possibly reconstructed. That's part of the analysis, but it's really coming down to where we put the proposed crossing.
All right. Councillor Williams.
At the site discussion we had today in relation to pedestrian crossings, correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that there was a physical and structural problem with that road in terms of its slope that didn't allow accessibility on a pedestrian. Is there a fundamental issue with the ability to put pedestrian crossings?
It was only discussion through the engineers at the time, and when you look up on the site, if you bring the pedestrian crossing roughly 15 to 20 metres down from Church Street, it slopes, and the slope of the roadway might have an impact on the grade of the pedestrian crossing. So that's an engineer would have to look at that in detail, whether the grades would work, and that's another issue that would have to be addressed.
Councillors, any further questions? All right. I'd like to give you an opportunity to ask a question. It's unusual, but I'd like to give you the opportunity to do that, seeing the seriousness of the matter. Councillor, if you could stand up again. And do you have a question or do you have a comment?
I do have a question. We've come up with a proposal to put the pedestrian crossing further down than what you've been talking about and what you've all clearly met with this afternoon. Do you think that that is a valid option?
Well, I don't think we can answer that question just at the moment because it would require a debate from the councillors and require some research on the roads and the applications. As you understand, we've only just seen this, and
so
I think we need to...
then when would you come back with an answer on that?
Well, we'll come back to you after tonight's meeting and let you know, but we'll debate it first.
And how long will it be until something is done about the safety on Reeby Road for the children of Hunters Hill High School?
Again, if I may, that's your third question. I can't answer that until we've had the debate tonight, until we work out what we're doing as a result of the debate tonight. But we'll come back to you and let you know what happens.
So
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Just a point of clarification, Mr Mayor. Our inspection today covered the full length of the road. It wasn't just up at Church Street. We actually walked down, looked at those issues at all angles. So we did a bit more than just that.
All right. So I have a motion 3.1 on page 1. Moved Councillor Collins, seconded Councillor Miles. Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, thank you, Emma and Tracy, for coming to speak today. This issue first came to my attention at the local area traffic committee on the 24th of September last year, and that's the operational committee that consists of RMS, State Transit, Police. Got a question?
It's with Councillor Collins at the moment.
Just for correction in the state.
It's with Councillor Collins at the moment. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, I don't know where I was, so I'll say it was the Police, RMS, Sydney Buses.
Local Area Traffic Command, I think.
Yeah, and also representative of the local member, which I'm currently doing that role. And we looked at the idea of putting, originally the business paper there had the idea of having the crossing right up the top of Ruby Road to bring kids over the other side. And we learned that through the buses, it needs to go further down. Once you start pushing it down, it doesn't really tend to work. And so the outcome of that original meeting, which I think is important, is that and if you look at the minutes, RMS needs the proposed crossing to be pushed as far down the street as possible, and it also mentions to allow the construction of a footpath on the western side. So that was raised by RMS and the sort of operational subject matter experts on that particular issue. The minutes of that meeting then came to a council meeting, which would normally be a receive and note, and the operational issues would continue. But at a meeting where actually Councillor Miles and Councillor McLaughlin were not there, Councillor Sanderson had a problem with it and did not want the investigation of looking at these options to happen, which I find, well, it was taking it back to it. You said you wanted to halt the traffic count and go to have a council on-site meeting. But if I may, point of order, sure.
Well, you'll get a chance in a moment, but let him finish, and you're welcome to rebut the statements if you disagree.
Absolutely. Well, the thing that I don't understand is that this is Councillor Sanderson's street. He shouldn't be in this discussion. He shouldn't be here. He shouldn't have raised that motion on the issue. He should not be in this room right now. Okay, that is absolutely, I don't think anyone would disagree with that.
I do.
Well, Mr Mayor, Councillor Sanderson asked what that little red mark is. That's his house. Okay, he has a very, it's a non-pecuniary interest, and I do not think it's appropriate he's being here. But anyway, he's here now, and apparently the Mayor thinks it's okay, then he can stay. Let me get to the actual issue now. I want to talk about 4 reasons why we really have to do this, and I want to put the politics aside because I know things haven't been working out. I don't know why you would snigger at that. I don't even know why you're here, but first of all, there's a safety.
Councillor.
Yes, Mr Mayor.
You're not permitted to criticise other people in this chamber. So could I suggest you stick to your presentation? Councillor Sanderson will get an opportunity to rebut anything he disagrees with, but please stick to your presentation.
If I may ask, is he allowed to snigger?
You should stick to your presentation and he'll respond to you when you're finished.
That doesn't really answer the question, Mr Mayor, but I'll continue.
Well, snigger is very subjective, and I don't think he was sniggering, so please go ahead. Please stick to your presentation.
First issue is it's a safety risk. As we heard about Tracy's daughter, and there have been other incidents there, we have hundreds of students going down there, and there is actually no safe way for them to get to school. There is actually no safe way because they have to dart across the road, to cross Reeby Road, or they go down an unmade footpath, which is very dangerous. Even if they get onto the other side of Reeby Road, it's a terrible path on the other side. Even if you were to go around the block, you can't actually. That half of that's not made, and the path is about that wide. You could not actually get a wheelchair to Hunters Hill High School from Burns Bay. This is completely unacceptable. So it is a safety issue. The second one is that we are liable. We are ethically liable because this is the safety of children. We have the opportunity to ensure safe passage of these children. We can do that. We can actually make that happen. We can have that impact. So we're ethically obliged and ethically liable to do that. We're also legally liable. When we have an unmade footpath that we know is a danger, when the council is aware that it's dangerous, it is my understanding that there is a legal liability issue there. Third issue is that it contradicts our disability inclusion plan and all principles of inclusiveness. And this is the disability inclusion action plan that we adopted last year. I want to refer to 2 points here. Number 13, the actions is to review whole of route accessibility along key active movement corridors. Without going into the detail, it is fair to say that with 350 students coming every morning, that is a key active corridor. Those students do not have inclusive pathway. Inclusive accessibility does not exist there. So it doesn't actually match up with this inclusion action plan. Another point I'll point to is 19, plan and deliver program of upgrades and renewals to council's portfolio of footpaths and car parks to improve accessibility within asset renewal program. Well, this is an opportunity here to upgrade and renew an unmade path to make it inclusive so that it satisfies the... See, it's no point just adopting a disability inclusion action plan if you don't actually do anything to make this place more inclusive. And the fourth reason is that it is just the right thing to do. And I know that there's a lot of passion in this room. We can all imagine, or can't imagine what Tracy went through when she got that phone call. It is that we have the opportunity to stop that from happening again. We can do that now, and then we can prevent the same kind of accident. And yeah, we can look at funding, we can investigate that, but we've got to resolve that we're going to do it. And if we need to repurpose some money, then I completely agree with Tracy that this is right up there in terms of priorities. I'd be quite happy to repurpose some money to go to something like this, which is ensuring safety of our school students. Now, you know, the school's been here for 60 years, and we have not had inclusive, safe access for children to walk to school. That is unacceptable, and that is why this is a motion of council, because it's not okay to say this is on our, you know, our delivery program or anything like that. It's been 60 years. We need to resolve to do this.
Councillor, you've spoken for 5 minutes. Can you wind it up or are you done?
That's it for now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Would anybody like to speak against the motion? Councillor Sanderson. Could I remind you not to criticise other councillors?
Regrettably, Mr. Mayor, at this point in time, I will have to oppose the
Can I
motion.
ask Mr Sanderson to speak up so that we can hear it?
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask you not to be involved in the debate in any way at all, please?
Sure.
Mr Sanderson has a very quiet voice.
Yes, look, regrettably at this point in time, I have to oppose this motion. I need to make a few corrections. I mean, there were quite a number of errors in what Councillor Collins had to say. First one, that this matter didn't come before the local, the Public Transport and Traffic Advisory Committee. It was actually the Local Area Traffic Committee, which is the one that contains all the statutory people. I didn't have the opportunity. The first I knew about it was when it came before the Local Area Traffic Committee. I represented there to try to improve the situation because I could see better solutions. And then when it came before council, I didn't oppose it as such. I just said, we said, look, we couldn't accept the recommendation of the Local Area Traffic Committee as it was. Council's recommendation at that time was, in fact, that that in relation to item C, councillors and the committee conduct a site inspection to identify and alternative options. That's what we've done tonight. And I believe there are a huge number of alternative options. And the other thing, I mean, I don't think we want to narrow it on this single issue. I think we need a little bit of investigation. Whilst I care deeply about the children of the high school, I think we also need to consider the rest of the community. I would, however, be prepared to support the motion if there were two amendments. The first amendment being that we insert the words viable and in front of, or viability and cost in front of the word, viability and in front of the word cost in the first line.
Point 1?
Yeah. There's a copy. Make it easier for you.
On the viability and the cost.
There you go. There you go.
Councillor Sanderson, could we just have a moment to add that to the motion on the screen so that everybody can see? Is that all right with you?
On the
Thank you.
is this in the first sentence on the
They're all-
viability and cost?
Highlighted.
Sure. No problem with that.
Sit down across. Here. Yeah, got it. Councillor Collins, excuse me, could you come up here this way?
Yeah.
If you look at this motion, it doesn't talk about pricing. You don't address it? No. That's just what it's all right. Can we just leave it in that box and discuss it in the box? Is that correct?
To read it out.
Councillor Sanderson, could you read out the amendments to your motion as they, and they're on the screen here now.
Okay. One, this is the amended first part of the motion, and that is that a report be provided to Council on the viability and cost of options including construction of a footpath from the top of Reeby Road on the site adjacent to Burns Bay Road to Nemba Street. Councillor Crasso has just said to me, well, it doesn't need to go as far as Nemba Street. In any case, to address dangerous crossing of the street for students of Huntersville High School walking from the overpass to the campus. I've suggested the insertion of a point 2, that the report consider the safety and accessibility for all pedestrians, including children travelling to and from all nearby schools and those with limited mobility.
Is it all nearby schools? Yes, great, got it. Amendment made. Is that it?
That's it.
All right. Is there a seconder for that those amendments? Councillor Williams. Well, we'll take the amendment. Would you like to speak to the amendment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, but I think first of all I'd like to take the opportunity to carry on and correct some of the things that Councillor Collins had to say. In terms of whether I am eligible to be here tonight, you and I had a telephone conversation this afternoon. Any interest I've got in this matter is non-pecuniary, and I don't see that I'm conflicted in any way. And I think that becomes, or it's of some concern, given the events of last week, given what Councillor Miles or the treatment that Councillor Miles and Councillor Collins gave the Emeritus Mayor Quinn, without declaring the fact that they were officers of the Liberal Party. Now, my concern, the reason that I put the alternative amendment to the meeting where the local area traffic committee's report was received is as a member of the Access Committee, I'm very concerned about access all around, not just for individual groups. And I've had a fair bit of experience in that area, as you recognise with some of the reports I've done in the area. I want to be sure that this is going to be accessible and safe for everyone. It has to include everyone. That's why I suggest these amendments.
Thank you very much. Wishing to speak against the amendment?
Just a clarification.
Clarification, yep. Councillor Miles.
Through you to the General Manager. It's my understanding, and I may be wrong, that if you have a non-pecuniary interest, as if you have a pecuniary interest, you have to declare it at the beginning of the meeting. If you have a pecuniary or a non-pecuniary interest, you also have to leave the chamber. Is that correct?
through you, Mr Mayor, it's a matter for individual councillors to decide whether or not they have a pecuniary or a non-pecuniary, whether it's a significant or a less significant interest. It's a matter for individual councillors
But it should be
to
declared,
decide.
or
If they believe that they should declare it, then they should.
Councillor Sanderson queried this earlier in the day. I took advice, and I did consider it to be a conflict of interest, and I told him that. He didn't say to me that he thought he had a conflict of interest. He was just checking on what my opinion was before the meeting tonight. So that was the reason that he spoke tonight, and he doesn't think he's got a pecuniary interest in any form, and that's why I stayed in the meeting. Councillor Collins.
Just to clarify, I think Councillor Sanderson said he had a non-pecuniary interest, is that correct?
Do you think you've got a non-pecuniary interest?
Mr Mayor, I don't believe I have a non-pecuniary interest, and after a discussion this afternoon, I was even more convinced of that. Where the proposal planned is just below the avenue. It doesn't really go anywhere in Ember Street, so I don't really see that. I mean, if there was any doubt whatsoever, it was cleared up at the site inspection this afternoon.
Thank you. I'm satisfied with that, and I think we should now move on. So, is anybody wishing to speak against the amendment?
Can I get some, if I may, some clarification?
Certainly.
I don't mind you putting a word viability, although I'm sure you have objectives there, as long as the report comes back, and options. But number two, what is the objective of including all pedestrians from all schools? Not that they're not as important, but is this just
Your question lies through me of Councillor Sanderson?
I believe it is, yeah.
All right. Councillor Sanderson.
Mr Mayor, I believe that there are people or students who attend other schools in the area who would cross the overpass and carry on down Church Street for various reasons. They might walk all the way, they might catch another bus. They've got to be considered in this equation as well. We just cannot consider this motion in the interests of one group. We've got to consider everyone, including those who are mobility impaired, and this is the reason for that amendment.
Thank you.
I'm very concerned that we have had occasions in the past where the access for elderly and people who are wheelchair bound, and these days that involves a lot of young people as well, that we haven't adequately catered for them. I want to be sure that in this proposal we do so.
Thank you. All right. Anybody wishing to speak for the amendments? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I see no harm in what has been included in the amendments, and from what Councillor Collins Councillor Sanderson has just clarified, then we as a council do have an obligation to consider all the factors, not just unique ones. I share your concerns about children going off to school in the morning. My daughter races out the door, slams the door, and then has to walk across Ryde Road, or hopefully not run across Ryde Road to catch a bus to school. There's no pedestrian crossings there, and I hold my breath for 10 minutes when she races out the door. So we all have our own stories, we all have empathy with what you're talking about. But the role of people around this table is to ensure that you do look at all the issues at hand and you weigh those up and make sure that you're making a decision in the best interest of the community. Being down there today, having a look at the site, I think there is a really easy solution to this, a cost-effective solution to this, and would give immediacy to the solution. And after we've done this, I would like to see included in the process a simple solution, which is to move the parking to the eastern side, to take part of the road adequate for a footpath, and put a fence like you've got down Victoria Road to contain the people. You've got an instant footpath to be done within a couple of weeks. Once we've been through the process of determining the various solutions. At the moment, just going straight to this high-cost engineering solution, which today we heard, if it went to its fullest completion, would be enormously expensive. I think we've got to look carefully and laterally at this. We've got to make sure we're including all the users of a very busy, complex transport node. And so therefore I support the motion as it's been amended, because it does provide that broader scope and broader picture for us. At the end of the day, after having that site inspection, there is a simple, quick fix for this problem that I would like to see considered in the process as well.
Is that something you'd like to see incorporated in Councillor Sanderson's amendment?
No, because it's just one of. I'd like to get some advice back as to how practical it is, how viable it is, and the cost of it. And then you weigh it up against the other things. But just from looking at the site, looking at the problems, hearing the immediacy, knowing cost is always going to be important in balancing up community needs and priorities, then there may be a simpler solution to a large engineering fix. But I'd like to get the information first. We always need to make our decisions based on sound information. These days, with this council, it doesn't have to take years to get that information. We can get it quickly, and I would hope that would be the case.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anybody wishing to speak against the additions to the motion?
I'll speak against them, not because I don't think they're good amendments, but I just think that things like mobility and access are going to be included in any report that comes back to us anyway. So I don't think it's entirely necessary. And I think the report, as it stands, is how it should be. I think if the local area traffic command has looked at this and they've come up with solutions, then they are the experts. So I think we need to take that on board. I do also think that in our maintenance schedule, we always prioritise footpaths and pedestrian crossings and access points around schools, hospitals and nursing homes. So this is a priority for this council. It should be at the top of our schedule. And if we do need to move money around, then schools, hospitals and nursing homes are always our most important areas of concern. I would like to propose one amendment though, and I'm not sure who will accept this, but I think we need to put a time limit on this report coming back to us. I would take some advice from the General Manager about when we could get that report back, but I think it needs to be as soon as possible. And whether that's 2 months or 3 months or 1 month, I think we just need to put a time limit on when we get this report back to Council.
All right, well, for the moment, we're still dealing with this amendment here. You've got a question which we'll answer.
Well, I just propose a foreshadowing a further amendment.
All right, so you're foreshadowing, okay. So we'll deal with is there anybody wishing to speak for Councillor Sanderson's amendment to the motion? Anybody wishing to speak against the amendment to the motion?
I'll speak briefly. I don't think it's a bad idea, number 2, but what this will do is it will just increase the scope of the report, and we won't get the report for 8 months. But if you were to bring that motion on its own to another council meeting, I would absolutely support it wholeheartedly. So I don't disagree with number 2. It's something we need to do at all the schools, but not tonight. As for the other adding viability, I don't really care about that. But
all right, so there's no further discussion. I will put the amendment to the motion. And the amendment to the motion is some changes, a couple of words in item 1 and point 2, which is on the screen. Is that correct, Councillor Sanderson? I'll put the amendment to the motion, excuse me. Those in favour? Against? That's lost. So we go back to the original motion. So is anybody wishing to speak against the motion? Anybody for the motion?
Just a question, Mr.
Question.
Through you to the General Manager, raising Councillor McLaughlin's point. What sort of time limit would we realistically be talking about to get a proposal to Council in the form of a report that we can move on this thing as quickly as we can?
Through Mr. Mayor, I might have to defer to Mr. Karepis. It depends on the level of internal expertise and the need to engage external expertise.
Because it's involving mapping as well, drafting and mapping, investigations. It's also, what do you want to put?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if we could come back to you the next day or two with a time frame. We just need to confirm if we need external consultants to assist us, and if we do, availability of that. But we'll come back as soon as practicable, but I'll come back with you with a firm time frame by the end of the week if that's acceptable.
Right.
Point of clarification then, can we just put as soon as possible in the amendment?
As soon as practicable.
As soon as practical or as soon as possible?
So are you happy to have that amendment in as soon as practical? Very good. Do you have a question, Councillor
Question
Crussell?
through you, Mr. Mayor, to the GM, I suppose. Part one of this motion, to my reading, is something that Council has already explored with the local area traffic committees, and so I'm just curious, because if that isn't the case, then I would support the motion, I'm thinking, but it hasn't got that far. We haven't explored other options.
It doesn't cover what we've already done. It exceeds what we've already done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'd like to also suggest an amendment.
All right.
Sorry.
What is your amendment, please?
Just the simple addition of the word options, including that Councillor Sanderson.
I think we've got that.
Oh yeah, I'm fine with those.
No, we haven't, because we rejected the amendment.
Oh,
Not in item one. Is we
Rejecting the whole amendment.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
I think you were happy to keep
I
those
have
extra
no
words
problem
in
with
item
putting
one,
those.
weren't you?
Yeah, it
So I
doesn't
think, I
affect the
think that
substance of the motion. So.
Councillor Collins was happy with the extra words to be added into item one. It was the item two which he wasn't happy with.
But they
But
weren't.
that has to be a
So
separate
it doesn't have to be an amendment.
No, I
if Councillor
incorporated
Collins-
into my
Incorporated in
motion.
his
But it
original
wasn't.
motion.
But it was.
So that's why
We
I'm
accept
asking.
Councillor Cresswell's amendment, not Councillor Sanderson's amendment.
So,
I'm incorporating that into
the original
the
motion.
motion.
All right, so there's been a change here.
No, I don't think so. But just 4 words.
Is that what you were talking about?
Yes, because it previously hadn't been added, and I
I
just
see.
wanted to make sure it was
Oh, I see.
added.
Okay.
Options included.
Thank you. Thanks for picking up.
Not,
And Councillor Collins, are you happy to have that added in there?
Yeah,
Those
sure.
words in there?
That's fine.
Very good. Seconder for that? Councillor Miles. Councillors, do we need any further discussion on this?
I do, I do.
Do you want to speak for or against
I
the
want to
motion?
speak for it.
Please speak for the motion.
With the understanding that this is an operational matter that Council has been working on for quite some time, and also with the understanding to any other families from other schools who are watching on the live stream, who have also come with their concerns in their school zones, Villa Maria, Baroni Park, just to name a couple. As a councillor, I'm of the understanding that our traffic issues, our assets are currently being reviewed, and I have faith in that process. So with that understanding, I would like to support this motion, knowing that these other schools are still being addressed, their concerns are still being looked at, their crossings are still being reviewed. I would also like, in supporting the motion, to applaud Hunters Hill School for their always active PNC and your commitment to support us in our lobbying to be RMS if it comes to that, and also your commitment to educate the children, because I do drive around that corner often, and the number of students walking across from the pub, looking at their phones, talking, walking in packs, not even looking over their shoulder when they cross that road. It's really important, and it must be ongoing. I would hope that the Mayor at the next meeting with the School Principals Committee might once again raise the importance of ever vigilant reinforcement of these rules. I don't necessarily think that adding a wider footpath is the answer. You're not engineers, we're not engineers. And so, again, I have faith in the process that council will do the right thing, do the right option research and get it right and deliver a good outcome for everyone once and well. So, Councillor Collins, thank you for bringing the motion, though I believe it was already underway. I'll support you because it gives the council that mandate from us that we really do believe in what you're doing and we support what you're already doing to get this done.
Thank you, Councillor Crosser. Councillor Collins, right reply.
I don't think I need one, but I'm excited that I think we have support, so let's just get this done. Thank you.
I think, if I might just summarise, I can see support all the way around this table. The fact that some councillors may have sought to modify the motion doesn't change the fact that they support the motion. We support safety. It's one of our highest priorities, the safety of people in our municipality. We haven't disregarded the children. We've been working through a process. That process involves a number of other government departments. The proposal which you've put to us tonight is not a proposal we've considered before. The footpath all the way down that street has not been considered before. So that's the first time that we'll be looking at that. First time we'll be going back to the other authorities, and the first time we'll be looking for options for that. So tonight is the very first time we'll be looking at an option as it's laid out on your drawing here. So we will need some time to consider it properly. It won't happen tomorrow, and we'll come back to this council with a report. So I'll put the motion, Councillor Collins' motions.
Can we have those documents tabled, the letter from the principal and the map provided by the PNC?
Yes, we will. We'll add them into the documents. So I'll put the motion. All in favour? That's a unanimous in favour. So I'd remind you, everybody cares about your children. I'm sorry what's happened to your child, and it's of great concern to us. Thank you very much. Councillors, 4.1, move Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Miles. Councillor Williams?
No, Mr Mayor, I won't talk about trees again. I think you're getting bored with that. I'll just move the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Is there any discussion on this? Anybody wishing to? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. We move on to 4.2, development applications. Councillor Williams, Councillor Miles. Councillor Williams, do you wish to make a comment?
Just a pleasant comment. I appreciate the detail here. It allows me to understand where council's going, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Miles, did you wish to comment?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Just for future reports on the LPP, could we have an attendees list? Because there doesn't seem to be an attendees list. I know we can go to the live stream and watch them.
Start to public attendees?
Yeah, no. The panel members
the
and
members.
The staff council.
It's on. I can put it on. It's on the website.
Yeah, I know it's on the website. We just put it on just so we know if anyone's.
As far as panel members, who sat on that day?
Yep.
We should do that.
And council staff like in our other committee minutes. Yeah, that'd be good.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? That's unanimous. Thank you. 5.1, native title manager notification. Now, I wonder if before we start this, I might ask the General Manager to enlighten us a bit about this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Through Mr Mayor, it's a change that's come into effect through an update of the Crown Lands Management Act, and we're required to have a native title person appointed to assist us as we go through plans of management and other work. So it is a requirement. It's something that's been discussed through the NESROC forum, and we've taken advice that there are limited companies that are suitably qualified to undertake this work, and so we've looking to appoint the Land Advisory
Land Services
Advisory Services Proprietary Limited, thank you, and they're part of the local government procurement panel. So it is a requirement that we need to fill.
All right, thank you. Move, Councillor Miles.
Just some questions if you could.
Do I have a move and a second
I'll
for the
move
motion? Move, Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Collins. Question, Councillor Miles.
Obviously, fantastic initiative that we're going to have someone to do this work. Just wondering, was they're on the procurement panel, so they're accredited or preferred provider of this sort of consultancy work? I'm just a little bit concerned appointing someone without a process having taken place.
Through you, Mr.
Do you want to
Mayor.
mention?
It's through the LG New South Wales local government procurement process, so they have a rigorous and stringent process, and we use that panel regularly for different works. So it guarantees that they've gone through a particular process, but also that they're competitive in their offering. And it's also this same consultancy has been appointed with a number of our other NESROC councils.
Pre-qualified?
Pre-qualified.
Pre-qualified. Councillor Miles.
Sorry,
Sorry.
again, through you, Mr. Mayor, and I apologise to the General Manager for my spraying questions at you. There's no costs associated with this at the moment. We're appointing them as our preferred consultant. Our preferred consultant. Is that correct? When we do a plan of management, I assume that then we'll appoint them and then we'll get costings at that point?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's no retainer per se, if that's where the question is. It's more a fee for service, so there's an hourly rate, and in the report it's noted that the services haven't been scoped because we're yet to work through the process with the particular plans of management.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
You moved the motion?
I did, and I think that's something we need to do, and we've gone through the most efficient process. Government works very effectively through a procurement process, pre-qualifying people, and then you know you've got probably value for money, and then let's say individual organisations, whether they're state runs the same thing, federal runs the same thing. So I support and I appreciate the opportunity which the General Manager has found through Local Government New South Wales to do a very efficient job.
Thank you, Councillor. Are we all in favour of this motion? Can I put the motion? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, councillors. That's carried. 9.1 is the Minister of the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee. Moved Councillor Collins, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Any discussion required, councillors? Can I put the motion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. We move to 11.1. Before I start on this, could I just have a comment from Councillor Sanderson before we move and second the motion? Could you just tell us a little bit about this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was a conference that Councillor Williams and I attended late in November. I apologise for the time it's taken to get the report in, but we've had a bit on our plate, and I didn't receive the slides for it until sometime in January. I think there was great value in going to this. I mean, there was an element of cynicism in that it was kind of the government saying, "Oh, we're going to do all these things that we probably should have done a lot earlier in the planning or the redevelopment of Sydney." Things like open spaces, and there's this realisation about we'll start planting 5 million trees, and that's something I think we've all heard Fiona Morrison talk about on, and she's extremely passionate about that issue. So it's good that someone has finally come into that position. And
so, Councillor, will you be moving the motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
You've given us an introduction. Moved Councillor Sanderson, seconded Councillor Williams. Would you like to speak to it?
Sorry, my apologies. I took that as
I was just looking for an overview of what had happened and where you'd been.
Okay, sorry.
I perhaps should have asked for the mover and seconder first.
My apologies. I misunderstood you. You wanted me to go on. Anyway, carry on from where I had got to. There were a lot of quite interesting speakers. It was interesting. Carolyn McNally, the Secretary of the Department of Planning and Environment, made the point that in her address on looking to the future of Sydney, that she noted that Indigenous people were the first planners of Sydney, that many of our routes or of our arterial roads followed their tracks, and by comparison, she didn't actually run the two together, but there is a notable difference. When they built Busby's Bore, its route was largely determined by the hardness of the rock. So I guess the point there being that planning has become somewhat more haphazard with European settlement. The other ones that I was going to mention is Dr. Alison Taylor spoke a lot about demographics, and it emphasises how the difficulty in predictions, because she had 3 levels of prediction of population growth for the Greater Sydney. At the fastest rate of growth, Sydney would reach a population of 8 million by 2042. If a slower trajectory is taken, it could be as long as 2057. So it kind of emphasises how difficult it is to plan. There are a lot of points too in that projection. I mean, one of the points she made was, life expectancy has been increasing at a huge rate, but a lifestyle disease is going to catch up, and is that going to level off? So there are all these sort of things to be taken into consideration. There was also a very interesting debate that opened with Chris Johnson, and of course you can imagine what his plan was. There's just railways, 20-storey development everywhere, then you put more light rail out, and then you have 8-storey development all around that. Could I
can you, we've got an extension, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Miles, please go ahead.
Thank you. Then there was another speaker, Simon, I struggled with his name, he's German extraction, Kuchenmarker. He pointed to a lot of the risks which were about of Sydney's rapid growth. First risk being substandard housing stock, and we've seen clear evidence of that. The other risk is the high-paying jobs won't be spread across the three central business districts. There was a summary by Peter Holt, which was very good on planning law. Clover Moore, I thought, spoke very brilliantly. There wasn't a lot to write on because, I mean, a lot of the things that she was doing, highlighting some of the problems that she was having with the Department of Planning in some of the development, like Green Square.
I'm sorry, that was Mr. Garipus being a bit over.
One of the very interesting speakers is Jim Betts. He's a man that didn't mince any words. You can see from the report some of the things he had to say. Eamon Waterford spoke about the mega region of the future. He looked at including both Newcastle and Wollongong in the metropolis. Interesting report. I don't think it really added up because at the end of the day, the dwellings that would have contributed over 15 years would have been beneficial for the regions, but in terms of the growth that Sydney is predicted to have, it doesn't deliver a great deal of housing. Then Charles Corselli, I found quite interesting. He made the statement that the real threat from technological disruption is the nonsense being promoted under the guise of innovation. It distracts attention, distorts priorities, and wastes and limits resources. I tend to be a little bit on to his way of thinking. I don't know that. I think the scope of technology is going to have a greater impact in terms of the broader planning issues rather than this micro technology that we'll never have aerial vehicles to carry people because he presented numbers that showed that was simply impossible. George Chapper was incredibly interesting. He was his company was involved with the development of some of the properties in the Barangaroo development, And there's a list of considerations that he came up with, coming up with energy efficient water sufficient development. Last speaker was Associate Professor Ron Cox. I found this quite interesting. He was quite critical of traditional investment decisions because he found that the quick write-off times meant that you didn't give the opportunity for development to be of high quality and last into the future, and that was having an impact on the transfer of wealth to new generations. And that point had been made in other places as well. I guess the most obvious lessons from it is that we've got to maintain our open spaces and green places. There was also discussion of placemaking, and so there was an overlap with the workshop we had over the weekend. All of it incredibly interesting. The way I've done the report is that some of the time I was not, the presenters didn't present their full story, but a lot of the time there was a paper or something that they'd written. So I've done, in the footnotes you'll see that there are references to those points, should anyone would wish to explore those further.
Do we have an electronic copy of it to make the links a bit easy to...
Sure. Well, you do, but I'll...
Of course we do. That's right, we do too. I'm sorry. What would you like us to do with these reports in the future? There's obviously a lot of good information that comes out of these. Is it something that we could spend half an hour on at some time during the year? I know Councillor Williams did an excellent report last year. We still haven't been back to that, and I'd like to touch on that at some stage.
So did Councillor Crassoy.
And Councillor Crassoy,
enthusiastic.
who visit to Western Australia, thank you. So, what would you like to see us do with these papers in the future, Councillor Sanderson?
Mr Mayor, I think it'd be nice to initially digest some of the material that's there, and when it's convenient, I guess we can have a bit of a discussion about what parts of that applies to us. I mean, much of it, because of our scale, probably isn't going to be relevant, but I mean, at the same time, I think the conference was well worth attending.
Well, thank you very much. So, you have a question?
No, I'd like to make a comment, if I may.
A comment. So, we've got the paper here. It's been moved and seconded. Is there anybody wishing to speak against this? For this? Councillor Craslow.
I'd just like to congratulate Councillor Sanderson and Councillor Williams for attending on our behalf and networking on our behalf and showing the rest of the community that Hunters Hill is passionate about keeping pace of city planning. It's a really important conference. It's very important that Council attend these opportunities and bring all this knowledge back to us for digestion. Just a suggestion on how we might start to collate these reports, which are all valuable. I certainly know at the workshop on the weekend there were so many things mentioned that I kept thinking, that was in my report from Perth, that was in my report from Perth, and I wanted to share. There are ways that you can electronically now add keywords to sections of reports so that they can be grouped off and then researched later. So if something comes up on water, I'm not sure if it's potentially already in our IT system that you can add keywords and search words, so that and if
be in trim if we got it.
Yeah, exactly. And then if we as council is given a template for writing our reports so that they're standardised, that we can then search things up when we have a workshop on, I'm passionate about, say, placemaking. All the documentation that we've gathered at all these very important conferences can be pulled together so we can look at what people are doing all over the world and make smarter decisions as a council on behalf of our community. So thank you, Jim. I enjoyed reading it and I enjoyed listening to it, and thanks again for your feedback.
Councillor Williams, I'm sorry, I should have given you first option.
No, you shouldn't. No.
Thank you.
I was sort of dilly-dallying in the background. So. I'd like to also thank Council for the opportunity to attend this event. As highlighted by Councillor Crassoy, there's a lot of different spin-offs from attending these sort of things. And I do acknowledge some staff also attended the event, and maybe they might like to comment as well. But and I compliment Councillor Sanderson on his thorough report and look forward to how we might take some of these issues forward. But some of the take-home messages for me at that venue, apart from the ability to see not only experts talk about their field, but see the interaction between a lot of council, either councillors or staff, in responding to positions that were taken by so-called experts. It's always good to get expert opinion grounded in reality of day-to-day life. And the conference again highlighted, the forum highlighted for me, that we've gone through a very comprehensive and, in my view, a very good outcome for our strategic planning for Sydney through the Greater Sydney Commission. Some people might not agree, but I think that process has set Sydney up for the future in a fairly comprehensive way. Uses all the right terms about place, well-being, heritage, data. All the building blocks are in there. It's got a logical path to spread the community and improve transport outcomes. So I've always been impressed with not only the process but the outcome of what is a very difficult and complex process of getting a whole metropolis reorganised, resorted, but trying to maintain the values which make it important to community, to enterprise, to commerce, etc. But also the conference highlighted, and some of the audience also pressed the point, is the disconnect between the vision, or the strategic vision, and the ability to do it on the ground. And a lot of that is because of the current planning laws in New South Wales are dysfunctional and don't deliver real outcomes that you can measure against the desirable things within the strategic plan. So I found that interesting, and that was something which, if you look at Holt's and paper in particular, he lays out a fairly daunting task for local government over the next 12 to 18 months. And we touched on some of those things over the last couple of days in our workshop. These community participation plans have got to be done by the 1st of December this year. Not trivial. The issues about the local strategic planning, what are those things? Statements.
LSPS.
Yes, whatever that acronym is. I tried not to use the acronym, but it sort of defeated me. And we heard a bit about that on the weekend as well. There's enormous pressure on council to deliver a whole new scheme of things without the resources. So all those themes came out in these presentations and the responses from the participants at the forum, because you had people espousing from the pulpit, and you had the people that really have to deal with it on the ground, and there was a good interaction between them, and you could hear where things have gone or are going and probably where they need to go. So I found it a very useful couple of days in helping me understand not only what is being asked of us, but also understanding how our colleagues and staff find they're going to deal with this issue. I might also note the challenge of getting in there, because that was the monumental day when we had the downpour and the whole of Sydney came to a halt and everybody was sopping wet inside, and it was an interesting couple of days.
Very good.
So thank you, Councillor, for the opportunity. Thank you, Councillor Sanderson, for a thorough report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Any further discussion on this? Can I put the motion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Is there anything else that we need to discuss this evening before we finish? Do you have any questions that you'd like to pass up? Councillor Williams.
Other business, Mr Mayor.
Yes.
Just following on from our briefing that we just had.
Yes.
And the suggestions that I made in that briefing, and I'd just like to put it...
Could you like to remind us again of those suggestions?
Yeah, well, that's what
Yep.
I'd just like to see if we could put that on the record, that maybe it's an opportunity for council. I found those briefings very, very good in terms of putting the building blocks on the table for us to understand and distill and then make a sound decision. We in the council tend to come into this chamber and make those decisions based on information that we gather in those processes. Not solely, the reports are there, but the reports are normally technical and difficult to understand and in the short time to explain to the community. So now we've got technology here. We've got hopefully a new website very soon. I don't say that in the pejorative sense. We will have a new website very soon. And we've got a new way of engaging with our community. I would think when we've got a bit of time on our business paper, and you can never predict, but tonight we're going to finish probably in 5 minutes' time, we could have had a presentation from the asset risk manager that would help fill in the detail which we don't talk around the table, that make a layperson or people that don't have that technical information feel more comfortable about why we're making decisions. So anyway, I just throw that on the table. I think it'd be useful to use those staff presentations, maybe in a more concise way, but have them either in this forum or have them as things that go up on the website, etc., to provide that depth of explanation.
All right, and I think
Thank you
we
for
had...
indulging me. Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you very much. And there were 2 issues tonight that we discussed. Would you like to tell us what those 2 issues were? One was a traffic issue? And
Well, the first one, I'll go to the second one, the traffic issue. I think after hearing the expert and being able to ask the expert and get answers to those questions which everybody was asking, I think put my mind at rest that we are on sound ground in the decisions we're making. But without the community having the chance to interact with that person, share the expertise and understand where they've come from their technical, then the community is not really following with us. Likewise with the asset risk management issue, this is a new world for this council in terms of actually having a dedicated person with the qualifications, the professionalism, the experience and the expertise to really deliver for us a solid metric, a solid basis for us to make our decisions. And councils always have the problem, no matter whether it's small or big, money always has to be prioritised. You can't do everything for everybody at the service level. This will give us a good basis for, and if we explain it to the community correctly, they will be able to see it's a complex process, but a process that is logical and it can be described. Like those pictures for each of the categories showed what is good, what is bad, etc. And I think that would help the community understand that. So I do compliment the General Manager on bringing forward that digestible presentation that obviously sounded on a lot of experience and professionalism. And I'm confident that as we go down this journey, we'll get a much better outcome in terms of managing our assets and providing the level of service the community wants. So that's why I thought it'd be a good idea to share that information up front in a way that the community can access and understand the detail which we go through.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any further business we need to discuss tonight? I'll declare the meeting closed in a record. 9:57. 8:58 rather, excuse me, not 9. Gee, 8:58. Thank you.